Theresa May's so-called New Deal is meant to appeal to MPs on both sides of the House and both sides of the Brexit divide. Among the promises, if they pass a withdrawal agreement, the chance for MPs to vote on whether to hold another referendum. There were also offers on workers' rights, environmental protection, the Northern Ireland border and a customs compromise, but it instantly met a chorus of disapproval from Labour and hardline Brexiteers on the Tory benches. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, there was a 2-hour cabinet meeting today. Actually, it was longer than that, but 2 hours on Brexit preceding Theresa May's speech. And in that session, which I'm told was reasonably torrid, there was a bit of a pushback from cabinet ministers against the big, bold offer that Number 10 had put in front of them, a series of options. Those options, the ones that were considered ones that might alienate Tory MPs, were sort of squeezed back. One cabinet minister said we went for the minimalist approach. But even that sort of squeezed back version of bold offer has still managed to alienate an awful lot of Tory MPs. And the bits that were intended to lure over Labour MPs don't seem to be working with them either. So the omens aren't terribly good for 2.5 weeks' time when, presumably, Theresa May will press the button and go ahead with that vote. But right now you wouldn't be sure it'll happen. Right now in West London you can see scenes of a rally that is kicking off for the Brexit Party. Maybe Theresa May might just be hoping that the surge which seems on the card for that party might just change some minds amongst Tory critics of her plan, maybe even amongst Labour MPs with pro-Brexit seats. She's also talking about how she's going to go around the country and try and sell what she's unveiled today. But I think the words of one cabinet minister just after cabinet probably summarise the feeling at that table tonight. And this cabinet minister said this whole idea, the second reading of the bill, was, we thought, a dignified basis on which she could leave. Now, I'm not so sure. At the headquarters of PricewaterhouseCoopers in London, watched by 6 floors of employees, Theresa May laid out her final attempt to get her Brexit deal through Parliament.
I've tried everything I possibly can to find a way through. I sought the changes MPs demanded. I offered to give up the job I love earlier than I would like. I've listened to concerns from across the political spectrum. I've done all I can to address them. And today I'm making a serious offer to MPs across Parliament, a new Brexit deal.
The big new offer was to pro-Remain MPs. Vote for the first stage of the Brexit bill and you'll get a chance to back a second referendum.
And if the House of Commons were to vote for a referendum, it would be requiring the government to make provisions for such a referendum, including legislation if it wanted to ratify the withdrawal agreement. So to those MPs who want a second referendum to confirm the deal, you need a deal and therefore a withdrawal agreement bill to make it happen. So let it have its second reading and then make your case to Parliament.
The Prime Minister said she remained deeply opposed to a second referendum, but her hope is that it lures some Labour MPs over. First signs were that it was driving some previously loyal Tories away.
Well, I've been on side. I voted for the Prime Minister's deal 3 times, but this might just have got me off side. The provision which I'm particularly concerned about are the words the Prime Minister used about a second referendum, which is the thing which for me is a total red line and completely unacceptable to me or my constituents. So the idea that we could have a situation where the government allows a vote on a second referendum, it passes, and that then, from what I understood, becomes government policy, to me is really very, very worrying.
The third time Parliament voted on Brexit, the streets outside were full of protest. Many will be back if there's a fourth attempt, but there may not be much tension about the result.
If anything, it's going the other way, mostly because I think the sense of trust is so broken. And that's what's so sad about this process, actually, is that normal political allegiances, that sense of team play because your leader is asking you to, have gone. They have fallen away.
Labour's Lisa Nandy represents pro-Brexit Wigan. Theresa May's hopes of success rest on winning over her and a few dozen like-minded Labour MPs.
At first glance, it seems very unlikely that this will be enough to get this through the House of Commons. The chatter in the corridors from both Labour and Conservative MPs with very different views on what should happen with Brexit is that the Prime Minister isn't offering much that is new, and that this will take us back round the same track that leaves us unable to find a resolution.
Cabinet ministers argued over the contents of the bill for 2 hours this morning, pushing back a number 10 attempt to allow Tories a free vote on a second referendum, and kicking out options number 10 had put in front of them, like allowing MPs a vote on a fully fledged membership of the customs union. Even that trimming was not enough for some Tories.
This is worse even than the agreement itself. A second referendum, which has always been against our party's policy. In a nutshell, the big bold offer is already dead on arrival at St Thomas's Hospital across the river.
Brexit Party supporters queuing for a rally in West London tonight. Theresa May might hope, when the results from the European Parliament elections are in, this party's surge might just jolt her critics and maybe some Labour MPs in pro-Brexit seats to back her plan. In Cabinet, one minister said everyone, even the chief whip, said it would be challenging to get this new deal through.
Gary Gibbon reporting. Well, now, earlier I spoke to the Justice Secretary, Conservative MP David Gauke. I started by asking him, is the deal already doomed?
Well, look, I hope that members of Parliament from across the House of all parties look very closely at what the Prime Minister has set out. And it's worth bearing in mind the fundamental position, which is that if you want to leave the European Union with a deal, then this withdrawal agreement bill is the vehicle in which to do that. And if the withdrawal agreement bill is defeated, then there is a distinct risk that a high possibility we won't be able to leave with a deal, that the choices become very stark, and either we leave without a deal or we don't leave at all. And given that most of us in the House of Commons were elected on the basis of leaving with a deal, I think that would be a great pity.
It's not very clear whether this would be a free vote for a second referendum. Obviously, if we're a free vote, that would make a difference.
Well, let's see as and when we get there. But the point.
Well, what's the promise? What's the promise?
Well, what the promise is that there will be a proper opportunity for the House of Commons to debate and vote upon whether there is a referendum, whether there is to use the phrase that some like, a confirmatory vote attached to a deal. And I make the point to, for example, those opposition MPs who have been campaigning for a second referendum, what vehicle do they have in which they can deliver a second referendum? Well, potentially the withdrawal agreement bill, if there's a parliamentary majority for it, could provide that vehicle.
Would you vote for a second referendum?
I'm not a fan of a second referendum at all. I would rather just implement a deal on the first referendum.
OK, well, I mean, that's your red line. Could you stay in a cabinet that contemplated no deal?
Well, I think, as you know, John, I think there are real problems with no deal in terms of the impact on British prosperity. Well, what I'm saying is that there are real problems with it, and I don't think that would be the right course of action. So I'm not a supporter of no deal.
Well, are they problems that would swallow a David Gauke position in a cabinet?
I suspect not, but as I say, this isn't really, in a way, this isn't really about me.
You suspect not? Then in which case, how serious is it if there is a no deal?
I think no deal would be very bad for the country. I've never sought to conceal that. I think the implications for livelihoods to move, in a single day from one set of trading relationships to another would cause very significant disruption.
But
for the economy.
Your party may just be about
as well.
Your party may just be about to become a no deal party, led by a no deal Boris Johnson.
Well, my party wants to deliver Brexit with a deal, and that's what I want to do. And there is an opportunity to do that with the withdrawal agreement bill.
There is one other certainty, and that surely is that if Mrs May loses this vote, that's it. She goes.
Well, I think the point I would make to that is that nothing like that will change the parliamentary arithmetic. And I do think that we do need to bear that in mind, that it's suddenly not going to change the approach of a lot of people if there is a different Prime Minister. The numbers are still the numbers. But I also recognise the country is getting more polarised, and it is getting more difficult. But we should try to find the right way forward.
Polarised is where I wanted to take you, because it is the Chancellor who is saying tonight that the choice may come down to no Brexit or no deal. Which side of that equation would David Gauke be on?
Well, I think he's right that if you take away the option of a deal, then it does become very, very stark.
I mean, surely we need to look for leadership in this matter.
Well, look, I think I've been very clear about the dangers of no deal, and I do think we do have to set that out. I don't think we should also just dismiss the difficulties that exist with no Brexit or a second referendum. That will have an impact. We should be straight with people on this as well. That will have a huge impact on public trust in our political system. And what the Prime Minister has done today is set out a way in which MPs will be able to shape that Brexit so they can deliver a deal for the British people, and then we can put this behind us and start to move on to some other issues.
David Gauke, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, and I began by asking, now that Prime Minister has opened the door to a second referendum, would he vote for it?
Let's see the terms upon which she's offering the deal. We're going to look at the bill that she's going to produce, and we'll study it in detail. We'll take it very seriously. I can't see from what she's said today that this will be acceptable to Parliament. But let's have a look at the bill. We'll take this seriously.
It is possible, though, that Labour will back this bill in order to get Brexit done, as majority of your constituencies voted for.
Not on the terms that I've seen so far. This is no different from what we were offered in the talks. It isn't the permanent comprehensive customs union that we need. It doesn't look as though we're going to get the security of protection of workers, employment rights and environmental and consumer rights. And again, it doesn't look as though we're going to get the close alignment with the single market that we wanted. So on all those criteria, it doesn't look as though the government has moved.
The Prime Minister has moved. She's made that clear. You acknowledge that. Your policy also is evolving.
I don't think she has moved. I'm sorry, I don't think she has.
Well, she says she's moved on workers' rights, environmental protections. We'll have to see the details of the bill.
We will have to see the detail, but I don't think she has. And if it's what we saw during the negotiations, it certainly isn't a significant move, and I can't see it being supportable. OK,
my point is about your evolving policy. Back in February, you said that you were moving towards a second referendum. I mean, if not now, when?
Well, what we said, and we've been absolutely strict in adhering to our party conference decision, that's the democratic body within our party, which is that to block a bad deal, and which we think Theresa May's deal is, or to prevent a no deal, we will keep on the table either general election, of course, that's what we want, but also the option of a public vote. And what we're saying now is that the reality to Theresa May, there's a large number of members of Parliament who won't vote for any deal unless there is a public vote. So I just can't see this deal going through Parliament itself. OK,
do you want Brexit to happen, yes or no?
Yeah, we want to abide by the decision of the last referendum, but we can't support a Brexit that will impact upon the economy and jobs in a way which is undermining the living standards of our people.
You're still content to fudge. Where is the evidence that that policy is working?
I don't think we are fudging. I think we've been straight all the way along.
You're straight in trying to square the Remainers and the Leavers, who both support you. But where is the evidence that's working?
No,
Look at the polling for the European elections.
OK, we are trying to bring both sides together. We are.
But where's the evidence that's working?
That is tough. We accept that's tough, and we've got to pursue that, because I think that's the only way our country, in the end, will come together, establish the principles of what happened in the referendum, but also make sure we get a deal that doesn't, as I say, undermine their livelihoods. I think it's the only way forward.
But when you look at the polls for the European elections, you're polling second behind the Lib Dems. That surely is evidence that trying to have your Remain cake and your Leave cake and eat them both, that isn't working.
It's a difficult route to travel to try and bring both sides together. Try and establish that sort of traditional British compromise. I know it's tough. But sometimes, you know, you have to do the right thing. And we're going to stick by trying to do the right thing, bring both sides together, protect jobs in the economy. Because I tell you, if we voted for something that was, I think, a bad deal or no deal, in 6 or 12 months' time, I'll have constituents coming to me who've lost their jobs, and they'll say, where were you when we needed you to protect us?
But you could put that back to the people. You could stop the hemorrhage to the Lib Dems by saying,
well, we may have to.
But you could say today, yes, we're going to have a second referendum.
Well, we may have to, and that's why we're saying we want to keep that option there.
So within weeks, you could pledge a second referendum.
We'll see what happens in this current debate. We'll keep that option on the table. And if necessary, yes, we'll go back to the people. But we've always said we want to respect the referendum. We want a deal that will protect jobs in the economy. This isn't one by the looks of it.
John McDonnell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also today, the European Parliament has announced that it will investigate donations made by the millionaire pro-Brexit businessman Aaron Banks to Nigel Farage. This programme revealed last week that Mr Banks funded a Chelsea home, a car and a driver to the tune of £450,000 in the year following the Brexit referendum. Also today, the Electoral Commission visited the offices of Mr Farage's Brexit Party to review the way it receives funding. Nigel Farage has denied any wrongdoing and said his party was more compliant than any others standing in the European elections. Paul McNamara has this.
Just 18 months ago, Nigel Farage claimed he was, quote, skint, as there's no money in politics.
Can I just ask you a quick question?
But last week, this programme revealed that for Mr Farage, there's actually been quite a lot of money. Approximately £450,000 spent on him by millionaire Aaron Banks to fund a lavish political lifestyle.
You're living the lifestyle of the elite, or you were, financed by very rich friends.
Terrible, isn't it?
And today, the European Parliament has now announced they will investigate Mr Farage, as these expenses were never declared. Not that he thinks it's any of their business.
Mr Farage, are you sure you don't have to declare all that money? Almost £500,000 from Mr Banks. It's an awful lot.
I've taken no money at all. No cash at all of any kind. Zero.
None at all?
No cash at all. No.
Hasn't helped fund your lifestyle at all?
I might have used a house. I've been to a party in America and I've taken no money at all.
Do you need to declare any of that?
No, there's nothing in politics.
So no cash, but an admission that he may have used a house worth more than £4 million, which Aaron Banks' company had leased, and an attendance at parties in the US, more than he would admit last Friday.
Did you receive up to £450,000 a year after the referendum?
Unfortunately not. It would have been if it was true, it'd be lovely.
Did he pay for your flat?
It would have been lovely if it was true.
Did he pay for you to go to the States?
Where I went on holiday and what my private arrangements are none of your business or anybody else's.
Just after this, a spokesman for Mr Banks confirmed funding Mr Farage's lifestyle following the 2016 referendum. And this is the moment Mr Farage found out.
Did he? Well, let me tell you something. Whatever happened after the referendum, I was leaving politics. It happened mostly in America, had nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with the Brexit Party. It was purely on a personal basis.
Whether personal or political, the European Parliament President today said that this will now be referred to their advisory committee. In London, it was the party, not the man, having their finances scrutinised. The Electoral Commission visited Brexit Party head offices today, days after concerns were raised that multiple small donations could be made to the party anonymously without its origin being checked. An issue, though, that affects all political parties. Today, a source at another political party told Channel 4 News that they raised this very issue with the Electoral Commission within the last 12 months. They had spotted someone routinely giving the party a few £100s each month, which in total far exceeded £500. They say the Electoral Commission replied to them, saying, seeing as no single payment exceeded £500, they didn't need to worry about it. The Electoral Commission say they will investigate whenever they find evidence of attempts to evade the controls on donations. And the Brexit Party say they check anyone that makes multiple donations and have sent money back to people, adding that today's Electoral Commission visit was politically motivated. The Brexit Party is expected to be the big winner at this week's European election, elections after which the European Parliament will reconvene and they're able to investigate Nigel Farage.
Well, now, during this European election campaign, Channel 4 News has asked to speak to the leaders of every main British political party. We're due to speak to Change UK's interim leader, Heidi Allen, tomorrow, but are yet to agree an interview with Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn or Nigel Farage. The invitation to all three remains open. One party leader that is joining us now from Edinburgh is Scotland's First Minister and SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon, you've been calling for a second referendum for months now. Theresa May has given you the opportunity for one. Will your colleagues in Westminster take it and vote for it?
Well, there's no guarantee of a second referendum being offered by Theresa May. What she wants people to do is vote for her deal, which would take us out of the EU, out of the single market, probably out of the customs union as well, on some vague promise of giving the House of Commons a vote on a second referendum. That's not something that SNP MPs are prepared to vote for. Scotland, of course, did not vote for Brexit, and we don't want Brexit to happen. And on Thursday, of course, people in Scotland have an opportunity by voting SNP to send that message loudly and clearly that we're not for Brexit, we want Scotland to remain in Europe.
Well, 1 million Scots did vote for Brexit. What do you say to SNP voters who want Brexit more than they want an independence referendum? What's to stop them voting for the Brexit Party?
Well, I don't think that will happen. If you look at recent polls, the breakdown of recent polls, there are very few SNP supporters who now back Brexit. But of course, the more fundamental point is that the majority of people in Scotland, the overwhelming majority of people, voted against Brexit. And if the referendum was to be held again, I think that number would be even higher on this occasion. Now, I've just heard the interview with John McDonnell. We've seen what happens to parties that are not straight with the people on this issue. Labour are trying to pretend that they're in favour both of remaining and in favour of leaving the European Union. And they're fooling nobody and hemorrhaging support and respect, actually, as a result. So the SNP is being straight and straightforward with people. We're not for Brexit, in line with the majority of the people of Scotland, and we want to see a stop to Brexit.
OK, so be straight with me now. You're not going to give Theresa May a lifeline. Labour isn't either. Many of her own MPs won't either. So she's entering her final days in number 10. That could mean Boris Johnson in number 10 within a matter of weeks or months. Would you, in that scenario, bring forward your promise to hold a second independence referendum?
Well, I've already stated my intentions on this. Later this month, we will introduce legislation in the Scottish Parliament to start the process of putting in place the rules for an independence referendum.
By 2021, though, it's a long way off.
3 years. Well, I want to see a referendum on independence within this term of the Scottish Parliament. And, I think the experience of the last 3 years have strengthened the case for Scotland being independent. Our vote on Brexit has been ignored. The Scottish Parliament has been cast aside. Its votes and its views have been cast aside. The efforts at an earlier stage of this process of the Scottish Government to find some common ground and compromise with Theresa May, have been completely disregarded.
Okay,
and meanwhile, we watch countries similar in size to or smaller than Scotland, independent members of the European Union, able to protect their interests, while Scotland is being treated with utter contempt by Westminster.
To be absolutely clear then, if Boris Johnson enters number 10, do you bring forward that 2021 notional date for an independence referendum? Would you do it earlier if he's number 10?
I think that is a distinct possibility. I actually said this in an interview last week. Now, what I also said is we have to pass the legislation. I am determined, just as was the case in the 2014 independence referendum, that in stark contrast to the Brexit referendum, the Scottish referendum will be of the highest international standards, that people will be well informed and able to take an informed decision. But I think there'll be people right across Scotland. I'm sure there'll be many people in other parts of the UK horrified at the prospect, not just of Boris Johnson, but any of these Brexiteers who misled people in 2016 becoming Prime Minister.
Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much for joining us. Well, here are a list of parties and independent candidates standing in the European parliamentary election in Scotland, which will elect 6 MEPs. And now to France, where Marine Le Pen's party has been neck and neck in the polls with President Macron's party before this week's European elections. Le Pen's Rassemblement National will be running alongside other far-right parties from the continent, and their new European political grouping is expected to send shockwaves across the continent. Our Europe editor, Matt Fry, is in Villeblevin, south of Paris, and he's there for us now. Matt.
Well, Cathy, this is only an hour and a half south of Paris, but it might as well be on a different planet. It's so different to the metropolitan centre of the country. What you're seeing right now is people leaving after a meeting with Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella. He's the 23-year-old lead candidate for the Rassemblement National, young enough to be my son, and he was on stage earlier talking about all the things that actually anyone who supports Brexit or Nigel Farage would also agree with. In other words, Europe has become too corrupt. It's the Europe of the elites. We need to get back to the Europe of nation states. We need to get rid of Schengen. We need to end the intransparency of Brussels. Globalization. This is the kind of, the rhetoric that we've heard from Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella over and over again. The one key difference is that they don't want to leave the EU. They don't even want to leave the euro. They want to stay very much inside the European tent and hollow it out from inside. They are Eurosceptic Remainers par excellence. Now, on the subject of Nigel Farage, Marine Le Pen, who's had her differences with him, came very much to his rescue. Listen. Monsieur Farage aura un grand succès selon les sondages dans les élections. Est-ce que vous pourrez travailler avec Monsieur Farage?
Écoutez, il n'y a pas de raison qu'on ne puisse pas le faire. Il n'y a pas de raison qu'on ne puisse pas le faire, puisque sur toute une série de sujets, nous partageons évidemment.
Mais vous n'êtes pas des grands amis, non?
Bon, les choses se sont améliorées. À un moment donné, c'était compliqué, mais enfin, les choses se sont à peu près améliorées. Mais je pense que quand on défend l'intérêt supérieur de son mouvement, on peut passer peut-être au-dessus de ses propres affinités personnelles. C'est ça qui fait la grandeur, je crois, d'un homme politique ou d'une femme politique. On ne fait pas de la politique uniquement en fonction de ses affections, mais en fonction de l'intérêt du pays.
Alors, une alliance avec M. Farage, c'est possible?
Mais nous verrons bien. Est-ce que M. Farage pourra refaire un groupe? C'est pas sûr. En tout cas, nous tendons la main à tous ceux qui partagent les critiques que nous formulons à l'égard de l'Union européenne et qui ont envie de changer les choses, même si nous savons que les Britanniques ne sont pas là pour très longtemps.
Il y a une enquête à Bruxelles sur les frais de M. Farage.
Ah bah tiens, ça m'aurait étonné. Alors, à qui le tour? L'Italie, l'Autriche, la France, à qui le tour? Tous les partis dits populistes ont vu développer depuis un certain nombre de mois des enquêtes contre eux. Tous. Et tous, on les révèle à quelques jours de l'élection.
C'est une conspiration.
C'est pas une conspiration, c'est l'utilisation assez minable par des gens qui ont peur de perdre leur pouvoir, des moyens qui sont à leur disposition. Voilà, c'est hélas tristement humain.
Now, Marine Le Pen is no longer the new kid on the block. She's a veteran of French politics and a mistress at political reinvention, from the party's name to the party's message. And her latest ploy, the 23-year-old candidate who now tops her party's list in the European elections. He looks great. He's very, very young, attracting very much the kind of young followers of his party. And I asked him whether this kind of new image was basically masking what was essentially still in Islamophobic and xenophobic politics. Listen. Qu'est-ce que vous dites aux personnes qui disent qu'au cœur, même si vous avez le visage de la jeunesse et vous êtes bien formé et tout ça, au cœur, votre mouvement est un cœur anti-musulman, un peu raciste, un peu exclusif?
Oh, je leur dis de sortir un peu, mais personne ne dit ça. Personne ne dit ça en France, en l'occurrence. Je vous rappelle que nous avons réuni un Français sur 3, 11 millions de Français lors de l'élection présidentielle, et que nous sommes aujourd'hui en tête de ces élections européennes. Donc il n'y a pas 25% de racistes, il n'y a pas 25% de xénophobes, mais il y a effectivement beaucoup de Français qui sont patriotes, qui sont attachés à leur territoire. Vous savez, on peut être issu de l'immigration. Moi, j'en suis issu aussi, aimer son pays, à condition d'avoir fait l'effort de s'intégrer, de s'assimiler. Moi, chez moi, quand j'étais jeune, je suis d'origine italienne, mais on parlait français. Et il n'y a pas de raison que les générations d'après soient dispensées de cet effort.
The key thing to remember is that this kind of place, and there are thousands of depopulated towns like this is where the battle for the soul of France and therefore also the soul of Europe is currently being fought. And as we said earlier, Macron's France and Marine Le Pen's France are very much neck and neck.